What's going on, guys? It's Jimmy here. So, I want to show you guys an interview here with the Congressional Budget Office that has some alarming news about our national deficit, our trillions and trillions of dollars here that we just keep piling onto the national deficit. And remember here that what they're going to say is really alarming here because it's stunning to me because inflation keeps going out of control and our deficit keeps going out of control. And because of the inflation, the Fed keeps pounding the United States small businesses and the average everyday families with these interest rate hikes. Okay. And wait till you hear what they say about how we're going to get out of this. It's absolutely wild. The solutions for this. And this is the exact opposite of what the Fed wants to hear on because this is the exact opposite on why they're hitting us with interest rate hikes. And their solutions are absolutely mind-blowing. So take a listen to this and you're going to kind of wonder why or how we're ever going to get out of this trouble with our country because it's almost going to seem inevitable that we're never going to. Take a listen to what they have to say here, and then we'll talk about it here in a moment.
Federal debt levels were named as one of the reasons, for the Fitch's downgrade, and the Congressional Budget Office now projecting the nation's debt will soon exceed its all-time high and skyrocket to 181% by 2053. Joining us now, Phil Swagel, is director of the Congressional Budget Office, and it goes all the way back years to different administrations as well. Phil, the deficit this year is not helping. It's getting worse as revenue is weaker than expected. So we're looking at about 1.7 trillion. It's $200 billion more than was expected in May, and about 5% of GDP. The 50-year average is 3.6. So we're still doing it. It's still happening, and no end in sight. Interest rates are going up. Isn't it just going to get worse?
No, that's right, Joe. It's a challenging situation, and it's an unusual situation, right? The economy is recovering. We're past COVID. The labor market is looking, much closer to normal, and yet the deficit is still wide. So it's an unusual and a very challenging fiscal situation.
Yesterday, we had a couple of people on, and it just seems so hopeless that just the realities of entitlements and an aging population and Medicare, Social Security, and non-discretionary spending and all these things. And I said, well, what's the answer? And they said growth. Growth is the only way to get out of it. And then I said, actually it was Kaplan, former Dallas Fed president. And I said, and what are you say growth will do it. What is the likelihood that we will engender enough growth to take care of it? And he wasn't very positive about it. So that's all we got, but it's very unlikely that that's going to happen to save us.
Yeah, that's part of the challenge. Growth will help, and I agree with Rob that growth will improve the fiscal situation. The challenge we face is that the fiscal deficit and the trajectory is so difficult that even super optimistic growth isn't enough by itself to make us sustainable. And so growth will help, and it will make the policy environment better, but ultimately policymakers need to make some choices, whether on spending or on revenue.
And then you've got the age-old argument and debate about what's best for private sector growth. Is it public-private partnerships with the government? Is it leaving more money in the private sector? Is it lower taxes? Is it higher corporate tax rates to lower the deficit? Is it lower corporate tax rates to try to spur growth and grow the pie larger? How do you do it? Both the two sides look at completely diametrically opposed solutions to how to get there.
No, that's right. I mean, you've listed all the choices, and that's for policymakers to make. There's a sense in which we're running the experiment a little bit right now, right? The administration has a fairly large amount of money at its disposal to make investments, to make government-directed investments in chip manufacturers and other things, in infrastructure. Will those be done in an effective way? Will those contribute to stronger growth in the future? Or will it be kind of money that's maybe not deployed as effectively? And we know examples of that, like from California with the high-speed rail there.
Solyndra.
And we won't know. Yeah, Solyndra, high-speed rail. That's right.
Yeah. The record's not good, Phil. Is there any good record? I guess the Railroad Act, or so we got to go back a couple hundred years, or the GI's got back GI bill. I mean, there are some historical some positives, but I can name a lot more negatives usually.
Yeah, there's certainly positives, and to their credit, the administration seems pretty aware of this. And I've seen news reports about that. The team they've assembled at the Department of Commerce is really private sector focused and looking to have efficient investments. So that's a positive, and we'll just have to see how they do.
Kaplan mentioned childcare. So, which is it? Childcare will expand the workforce and eventually, spur growth and add to GDP. That's one. What one side would say. The other side would say it's another unwieldy federal program that's going to end up costing too much money and just add to our problems. Which is it? How do we do it?
No, that's right. It's both. It could be either. Will the private sector provide that child care? And then how much, if there's additional child care, how much additional labor force participation will that provide? The same thing with elder care. There's evidence about that especially women will drop out of the labor force for a period to care for their elderly parents. Look, we have options, right? If we want a larger labor force and use that to spur growth, we have the options you mentioned, and there's also immigration. And people want to come to the U.S. There's lots of challenging issues around immigration, but that's another lever to boost growth in the future.
All right. Why not use the strength of the dollar and the reserve status of the dollar, knowing that we can do as much as we want and we're always going to be able to borrow. So let's just really ramp it up Keynesian and just, let's engender 5% GDP growth from government spending. And, damn the torpedoes, we'll worry about it later. If we have to pay. People think you can do that. It's called MMT. The Fed will save us, print enough money. Why doesn't that work, Phil?
Yeah, I mean, I think we've seen the downsides of that over the past couple of years. First with the inflation that resulted. Now, of course, that was partly the supply constraints on top of the fiscal. Is
there anything to it, Phil, that we can do it? We can print. The dollar is a reserve currency where we can print and people will continue to buy. Is there a breaking point? Because MMT people don't think there is.
Yeah, at some point there is, whether we have inflation in the near term and that contributes to higher interest rates, or bond purchasers will balk at buying more U.S. debt. At some point, we'll see that in inflation and interest rates, and then that feeds back into growth, which, as you said, makes things more difficult.
Yeah, so you're starting to see some of the problems right now is that we need to see economic growth to even start to get out of this problem. This is just obviously one of the problems here. But the problem is that the Fed is hampering our economic growth severely right now with these raising of our interest rates 11 times right now, and possibly even more coming here, and keeping these interest rate hikes high right now. The Fed is severely hampering economic growth right now, and with no end in sight, and possibly going to be keeping interest rates high for longer right now, and really keeping the economy in at least a mild recession right now. I mean, we're seeing bankruptcies. We're seeing bankruptcies on business sides right now. Businesses can't get access to capital because of how high interest rates are. And even if they can, they don't really want to borrow because of how high interest rates are. And I mean, if you just see my recent video on how high credit card interest rates are at all-time highs, it's literally sickening to people. And I mean, just think about this. It's literally affecting everybody across the spectrum. Businesses, small, medium, large, average, everyday families. And how are we going to get economic growth out of this? So... and the problem is that the Fed is trying to use its only tool at its disposal, interest rates, The Fed doesn't have any other tools, and people are screaming to the Fed, please stop using interest rate hikes. And the Fed's like, well, we're gonna use it again. Yeah. And this is the problem. This is the problem right now. And the problem is the Fed keeps looking back. Oh, well, interest rate hikes have worked in the past. Let's just keep pounding away at it. And we're like, dear, for the love of God, stop with the interest rate hikes. We've already done it 11 times. Yeah. It's like, when is enough enough? And you heard them. They're like, well, we need to see economic growth to try to get out of this nation's debt. It's the only way. And honestly, that actually goes back to kind of the Trump economic plan where he lowered taxes and said, well, more economic growth will actually make up for the lower taxes, because if we have more economic growth, it will actually spur more income and actually make up for the less tax rate, because more growth will be coming in and you'll actually generate more revenue, which is actually kind of it old. I can't remember if that goes back to Reagan. Is that Reaganomics? Or I think so. It goes way back there. But it's actually a kind of an old Republican way of thinking. But the problem is if you have a Fed that's hampering your way of growth because they want to bring down inflation, and if you really think about it, inflation is actually a fast-moving economy. Things are growing very fast, at least in some parts. Things are going up very quickly. Prices are going up very quickly. So it's like you can't have your cake and eat it too. So what do? Do we have a fast-moving economy with higher inflation? Remember, things are moving fast. Growth would be moving fast. Prices would be moving fast. Remember, if you have a fast-moving, fast-growing economy, inflation is going to be higher. Things will be growing faster. Inflation will come with that. Remember that unemployment is, near historic lows. You kind of put all that together, you will have inflation. You will not have low historic inflation with a faster moving economy. If you look over at China, when they had their high growth years, they had higher inflation as well. Things were moving fast. You're surely not going to have low inflation when you have a high growth economy. So let me know your thoughts here in the comments. But things are wild right now, absolutely wild. It's just, this economy is just. And honestly, I think that the Fed and the government has no idea what they're doing right now. None. So I guess we'll wait and see. Let me know your thoughts. Make sure to subscribe down below. Click the bell icon. I'll keep you up to date here. Make sure to like and share these videos. Here's some videos you should watch next. Click here to see Putin and North Korea combining nuclear arms. Or click here to see why people are boycotting Walmart. Click on one of those videos next. Thanks for watching, guys, and I'll see you in the next video.